Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Reverend Dr. Salome Raheim. I'm a member of One Spirit in Action and a board member of Transforming Lives. Along with Reverend Heidi Tessmer, I will be one of your moderators for this evening's program. Transforming Lives, One Spirit in Action, and everybody who is involved and has been involved in making this event possible are so pleased that you've chosen to spend the next 90 minutes together for the film screening and discussion of the interview. Transforming Lives and One Spirit in Action, OSHA for short, have been working together for about a year and a half on our common goals of supporting and helping to address some of the needs of people who are incarcerated, advocating for justice. And you'll hear more about the specifics of the work, but OSHA, which is an affiliated sacred activism group of the One Spirit Learning Alliance and One Spirit Interfaith Seminary. We have been working together on these common goals, and this program is actually the fourth of a series that OSHA has been involved in that has focused on remembering our forgotten community and bringing awareness and how we can work together to address some of the injustices of the criminal justice system. So with that, I would like to turn things over to my colleague and moderator for tonight, Reverend Heidi Tessmer.
Thank you, Salome. Welcome, everyone. I'm delighted to see such a wonderful turnout. As Salome said, my name is Reverend Heidi Tessmer. I am a graduate of One Spirit Seminary class of 2020. I've been a member of the One Spirit in Action since 2018, and I've been working with Transforming Lives for about a year and a half. I am a mentor to an incarcerated gentleman who is serving 25 to life, and he is on year 16. And I am also a mentor to a young woman who just started her 10-year sentence. She was just transferred from Rikers. It has been a pleasure working with Transforming Lives, and right now I would like to introduce Cynthia, who created Transforming Lives. And Cynthia, I have known Cynthia for about 2 years now. She was a volunteer with the Barred Prison Initiative, which provides college education to incarcerated individuals. It was through her volunteering that she became aware of how much support our brothers and sisters need behind the walls. So she partnered with 2 incarcerated individuals and created Transforming Lives New York. Last year, Cynthia and Jamel Brown created the book Scrolls from a Forgotten World, Prisoners' Writings and Reflections. And you'll be able to get that on their website, which we will provide a resource list in the chat at the end of our discussion tonight. And Cynthia is one to speak up and to seek justice, knowing that there could be consequences. She is the type of person we need to help reframe the discussion on the carceral system. Through the Transforming Lives New York program, she has reached a whole new group of individuals into the critical conversation of the carceral system. It has been an honor and a pleasure getting to know her, and I look forward to continuing our work together and partnering on future events. So now I would like to turn it over to Cynthia.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. Yeah, I believe that you can't really work on something unless you really are up close and know it personally. You know, to really work, we don't work on ideas or theories. So when I got involved through the Barred Prison Program, which does offer college education to 1% of the individuals who were incarcerated. My two friends and I who were incarcerated, those two were incarcerated, realized that we needed to bring more rehabilitation into the prison. We created a mentorship program with people who were in for behind the walls for a long time. And our mentorship program really goes both ways, really goes both ways. And we have come to know some of the horrible things about this broken system. And I'm so glad you came tonight, because when you see this film, there are certain things about this film that will never leave your mind. And it will give you an further understanding of how broken the parole system is. And I am so honored to have Carol and Jose here tonight, who were in the film. It's a tough film. It's definitely a tough film. So, let's get to it.
Nobody wants to talk about the worst thing they ever did, all right? Nobody wants to talk about that.
I try to go in there and just be honest. Just be honest. That's all you can do.
I was hopeful that I was gonna be able to go home and be with my son and my mom.
You're being asked to relive a moment that you probably struggled with for a very long time.
Being frank, I was like scared. I figured it would be hostile.
You sit down and, think about, what could you say? What would you say?
My worst period of my life would not forever define me.
As a child, my dreams and aspirations were, I wanted to be an accountant. Numbers fascinated me at one point, and being able to get paid to take care of other people's money just was very appealing.
My fiance and I had plans of kind of doing like the happily ever after thing. We were kind of like twins, so to speak,
I thought at that time, growing up in the 60s, that I would become the next great Puerto Rican baseball player. But, that dream just kept getting dimmer and dimmer until it faded into nothing.
I was convicted of second-degree murder, and my sentence was 15 years.
18 years.
20 years to life.
25 years.
25 years to life.
A patrol car, they actually stumbled on us. And a gun battle ensued. And the police sergeant took a shotgun blast in his face. And he lost his eye vision.
Did a robbery, and in the course of the robbery, 2 people did get shot and 2 people died because of my reckless behavior.
I got arrested because my then boyfriend and I, both of us were crack cocaine addicts. We ended the life of my grandmother to fuel our addiction.
And I made a commitment then that that would be it. I would never hurt another human being.
In '96, when I first went to the parole board, I felt that I was ready.
I'm anxious. I'm super nervous. But I'm hopeful because reading the guidelines for what can possibly get you out or grant you parole, I was asked to, 1, do anger management, 2, substance abuse treatment, 3, do a vocation, learn a skill, and 4, my time. The first 3 of which I completed before my first 5 years.
I had a master's degree. I'm a published poet. I was a published poet by that time.
I had multiple job offers. I was ready to go.
It was around Christmas time, and I said I may show up on my wife's doorstep for Christmas.
When I first got my denial letter, I was disappointed. The second time I got a denial letter, I was disappointed, I was hurt. The third time I got a denial letter, I was disappointed, I was hurt, I was angry.
Went back in 2002, denial again, 2 years. 2004, 2006, 2008, 2009, 2011, 2013, and 15. What could I say? What could I do?
2009, 2011, 2013, with no other justification than the nature of the crime.
The nature of your crime, the one issue that you can never change.
Don't matter if you look at this crime 10 years, 20 years, 100 years from now, it's going to be the same. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be the same.
For the interview, it's impersonal. They sit you in a room, there's a big television in front of you, 3 commissioners sitting there, and you're talking to a television.
And each time, right out the gate, we had a discussion about the instant offense. Tell me, how do you take the life of somebody who was always there for you? Make me understand how it was just so easy for you to end her life. My jaw dropped. The tears started flowing. I couldn't get control of myself. I couldn't answer his question because I was so overwrought with guilt. At that time, I was with an abusive boyfriend. So anything he told me to do, pretty much I did. When he decided he wanted to get more money, he went into my grandmother's room and began to suffocate her. I walked in to see him doing this and was threatened with, if I don't help, my son was next, who was laying in the bed right next to her. I spent most of my time crying. I didn't feel comfortable talking to them, you know?
Most of my hearings were just focused on the crime. We did all that in court. The judge saw and heard everything that could possibly be said or heard about it. That was part of his considerations when he sentenced me to the minimum.
I had a commissioner named Ferguson twice. He's a former prosecutor. And he will conduct the hearing like he's interrogating somebody. This guy's doing your hearing. That's very disturbing.
You've come to prison because you were not acting like a human being on the outside. Now you're inside. We want you to act like a human being.
Ferguson was a pit bull. He told you straight up that he didn't like you. He didn't like what you were in jail for. And if he was straight to the point.
You have some individuals who are very cunning. who can sit there and BS you for 10 minutes, for 20 minutes, and tell you everything you want to hear. And if you don't have the experience, if you don't have the chops to assess someone who has perhaps dedicated their life to criminal activity, someone else may get raped or murdered. And that's your responsibility. I look at their demeanor, I listen to the sound of their crackling voice, I see perhaps tears in their eyes. Some are true tears, some aren't.
I asked another commissioner, have you considered the fact that during my incarceration, I've done X, Y, and Z? And the commissioner picks up my file and goes, oh yeah, we read all that. Just flips through it like a phone book. Like, yeah, we read all that, and drops it back down the table and looks at me like, okay, now what?
In prison, some of us focus on changing who we are. You know, we're consumed with helping others make this same transformation. And for it not to have any value, when you go to a parole board, no value whatsoever. That almost enrages you, that they could be so callous.
You're in on a term of from 6 months to 10 years for assault with a deadly weapon?
Yes, sir.
And
The whole parole scheme was first invented in New York State.
Why is it that you didn't learn from your first incarceration?
So this is the epicenter for the system, and yet it's one of the worst now. I remember a time that parole was a fair system back in the 80s, but somewhere along the line it got into the punishment era.
Good to see you. Nice to see you. Want to shake things up here. How are you?
George Pataki practically rode into office on the backs of guys like me.
I will be putting before the legislature measures to eliminate parole for violent felons. Violent felons belong in jail.
They just started like blatantly just across the board denying parole for guys like myself.
During the Pataki administration, the release rates completely flip-flopped. If you had, let's say, 3 out of 4 who came before the board getting out, 3 out of 4 under Pataki stayed in. He did an absolutely brilliant job. The justice system cannot survive the hug-a-thug mentality, meaning you've had a bad childhood, let me give you a hug, now you can go free.
My kids, they just didn't think I was ever going to see me out. Seeing me in prison was it. There were times when I thought that I was never going to get released. I personally know men who are being hit by the parole board and they're in their 70s.
If you've been in prison for 20, 30 years, people are not a high risk to commit murder again or to commit arson again. The research is so clear on this and has been for years. What you might have been as an 18-year-old or a 17-year-old or even a 20-year-old is not the person sitting before you today as a 50-year-old, a 60-year-old, or a 70-year-old. And we are running geriatric institutions in America right now because we're not releasing people.
So people might say, oh, you know, you have to let them out, you have to let them out. That's the only thing that matters. No, it's not. I have members of the public who feel that the component of retribution has not been satisfied.
All I could think about was being able to see my son, my grandchildren, at least live some semblance of a life, because I grew up in prison.
After the first few boards, I stopped telling my wife I was going because it was just messing her up. You know, she'd get all excited and get ready for you to come home, and then you get denied. After about 6 boards, I stopped telling anybody I was going aboard. I would just go.
When you open up regularly and you're denied, it's kind of bulky because there's an appeal paper in there as well. So when I picked it up, I said, this is light. This is not bulky.
I'm looking in the envelope, I'm trying to feel around, make sure, well, is this real? There's no appeal? There's no appeal papers, no appeal papers?
I'm looking, it says, parole granted. But when I went to go look at my name, I couldn't read it. I was so in disbelief that this could not be happening to me. I have been waiting for this for so long that I had to go ask somebody else, just do me a favor, tell me whose name is on this piece of paper.
Was this real? Was it real?
I felt such a rush come through my body, like all the oxygen left my feet.
In the end, I appeared at 10 parole hearings. I ended up doing like double the minimum sentence.
My eligible release date was 1996, and I was released in 2018.
I had just turned 28 when I was arrested. And when I was released, I was 66 years old.
Why do you think you were eventually released?
I think the determining factor for me being released was the fact that a new commissioner was the lead interviewer in my case.
Jose spent his life organizing in prison to help other people. Nowhere else believes that you shouldn't be forgiven and that you don't have the right to move on just because you did something heinous at one fixed point in your life.
I left a lot of good men in prison, and some passed away. So, this is personal for me.
I have 4 grandsons. My biggest thing is that when I see them, I hug them for a really, really long time. And they get to the point where they're like, Grandma, Grandma. I'm like, okay, wait a minute.
I think the best part of being out is I get to be me boldly. Because before you be you too boldly, even if it's positive, there's a possibility you can get locked up.
I think the best part of probably being released, you're not telling people, not telling you to lock in, lock out, not telling you when you could eat, when you could sleep.
Most people don't even know I was incarcerated. Unless you tell them, they don't know you're incarcerated. They treat you like a regular person. So, I act like I always wanted to be. I'm the person I always wanted to be. I'm only better, and I'm getting better every day.
Thank you. Thank you for watching that with us. And now I invite us all, because this is such a powerful film that creates so many emotions. Just invite us to all take a collective breath and just settle in and get present in our bodies. I invite you to just follow your breath as it moves in through your lungs, through your nose, and down into your lungs and down into your body, and follow it as you release it, as you exhale. And then either with your eyes open, fixed on a still point, or you might want to close your eyes if you're comfortable, to bring your awareness to your feet, to help us just be fully in our bodies and present with whatever it is we're feeling. And bring our awareness to our seat and feel the support of our seat in the floor beneath us, knowing that the earth beneath wherever we are is supporting us all. And then just continue to breathe and just feel whatever you are feeling, and notice what you're feeling in your body. If you find, as you just scan your body from the tips of your toes all the way up to your head, if you notice any points of tension or tightness, feel free to just, with your next out breath, just breathe that out. Again, breathing in and then breathing out, and just releasing any tension or any tightness that you might be aware of, that you might become aware of in your body, so that you can be fully present for what is, not trying to change what is, but just allowing your body to be in its least tense, least stressful state in this moment. And so in a moment, I'm going to bring us back together. And before I do, I just invite you again to just focus on your breath. Breathe in and just hold it for the count of 3, perhaps. And then at your own pace, let that go. One more time. Since you're on mute and no one can hear you, you might even want to breathe out with a big exhale, with a big sigh, to just let your body let go of whatever might be there. And last time, breathing in, holding for a count of 3 at your own pace. And breathing out with that final release. And then when you're ready, bring your attention back to the screen, and Heidi is going to take us into the next segment of our program. Thank you.
Thank you, Salome. At this time, I'm going to introduce our 2 speakers who were featured in the film. We are delighted they could join us tonight. Jose Saldana is the director of RAP, Release the Aging People in Prison. Jose was released from state prison in January 2018 after 38 years of incarceration and 4 parole denials. During his decades in prison, he obtained a college degree. More importantly, he committed himself to organizing and advocating for racial justice and meaningful changes to the criminal legal system, including transformative changes to parole and sentencing. He is alumnus of the Resurrection Study Group, which espouses the non-traditional approach to criminal and social justice. Since his release from prison, Jose has been a critical advocate pushing for key policy changes for incarcerated people and building strategic partnerships to end mass criminalization. He was chosen as RAP's director by Mujahid Farid and the entire RAP leadership collective just before Farid's passing in late 2018. As an advocate, Jose is a prominent national speaker on issues of mass incarceration and ending life sentences. He is the recipient of the 2019 Freedom Fighter Award issued by Citizens Against Recidivism. He mentored hundreds of men during his years inside and continues to inspire all of us with his energy, commitment, and leadership. Carol Shapiro was also featured in the film. She is an innovator in the field of criminal and social justice for over 40 years. Most recently, Carol served on the New York Board of Parole as commissioner. Prior, she was the founder and president of La Bodega de la Familia and Family Justice, known for the integration of asset and family tools, coupled with a public health perspective to reduce reliance on incarceration and improve family well-being outcomes. By tapping the strengths of families and their social networks, Family Justice demonstrated the means to break cycles of victimization. Oh, hold on, folks. Victimization and justice system involvement. In partnerships with law enforcement and other mandated systems such as child welfare and public housing. Carol has devised and collaborated on numerous foundation and governmental initiatives to more effectively address crime prevention, addiction, mental illness, and aging. Prior to joining the NYS Parole Board, Carol served as an advisor to the governmental and citizen sector efforts and provided technical assistance and consultation services to federal, state, and local governments and nonprofits in the US and abroad. Among her many awards and honors for social entrepreneurship, Carol is a Ashoka Fellow. Her startup, La Bodega de la Familia, under the auspices of the Vera Institute of Justice, received an Innovation American Government Award. So let us please welcome both these incredible individuals, and we will hear from them. They will have a discussion, and then we will open it to Q&A.
Good evening, everyone. Jose Saldana, formerly incarcerated. I was released 2018. And I'd like to say a couple of things about what happened during my incarceration. As I was approaching my 50s, I've seen men who were in their late 50s, sometimes early 60s, 61, 62, start dying. And always the cause of death was cardiac arrest. And this became so common that I thought that I may very well be next. So we formed a discussion group to address how we felt about dying in prison. And the one thing that we came up with a few things that, we understood that a system that relies on perpetual punishment does not just punish the individual in prison, it punishes families. In New York State, it amounts to tens and thousands of families that are being punished for one crime. We realize this system that relies on punishment uses punishment to take everything from the person, family ties, everything the person may own, even life and freedom. But there are a couple of things that this system can't take from us. And that first is dignity. So in prison, those who have lost their dignity or those who don't value dignity, we come together in search of that dignity so that we can embrace ourselves with that human force that allows us to go on. And another thing, hope. We don't give up hope. We acknowledge that we may very well die in prison. That's not giving up hope. That's just the reality that we face. But we made the determination, a pact among ourselves, that if we must die in prison, then we will die with dignity and we will die as honorable men. And those who make it are committed to changing this system that devalues the humanity and dignity of incarcerated people, that just punishes and defines justice as revenge and punishment. Those who make it are committed to changing that system. This is why I do the work that I do today.
Thank you, Jose. Carol, would you like to say a few words, please?
First of all, I want to thank you, Salome and Heidi, for doing this work. And every time I see this film, I'm reminded of our conveyor belt justice. I'm not the hero. The men and women who survive are this system, which is not transparent, by the way, are really heroes. And I so admire the work of Jose and his colleagues. And I just want to thank you for presenting this. I met so many amazing people when I was on the parole board. I couldn't manage the parole board for very long. It was a horrible experience for me personally because I had so many risk-averse colleagues. But the truth is, our system in parole is really broken. And I've spent my life, I started at 16. I went to my first jail at 16 because I had a teacher who talked about the disparity of bail in 1970. My mother herself was crushed by a drunk driver, was in the hospital for 2 years. She had 96 bones broken, but I grew up with redemption and remorse. And, you know, the stories of this film are tragic. We have created a system where we are so risk averse to understanding that people transform. They're way more than the worst thing they've ever done. We've all done some cockamamie crazy things. And I found that my reason for joining the parole board after spending so many years in all the reform work I've done was to think if I thought I could transform parole in New York. How ridiculous was that by being on the inside? And I was unable to, but I really believe the stories that you saw in this film are real. People do transform. People are doing amazing things. And we need to shift our focus from this punitive system we have to the one that believes in redemption, reform, transformation, and support, because as Jose and others have said in the film, the impact on our families and communities, particularly of color, are profound. So for me, I'm just grateful to be here tonight. I think this film speaks volumes, and I'm saddened by it, to be honest with you. I wish we didn't have to have these films. I wish we had different stories to tell and were able to be told. I mean, there are so many amazing stories, as Jose said. People are lost in prison. They die in prison without ever realizing all of their potential. And so I'm grateful that you're showcasing this tonight. And I hope it inspires people to understand that our system here in parole in particular is really broken. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, I actually, I'm I invited someone from the Massachusetts Parole Board to join us tonight, but I never heard back. What a surprise. So at this point, we're going to open it up to Q&A.
I would like to know whether this organization is part of the Transformative In-Prison Work Group New York chapter. And if not, would you be interested in finding out more about it? It's a collection of various organizations that work with incarcerated people on some kind of issue of incarceration or parole. And they're an outgrowth of a similar organization in California. And the idea was that collectively we might have a voice that the carceral system might listen to. I myself am a member because I'm a part of the Alternatives to Violence project, which works in many New York prisons as well as many other states. And I've done workshops in Sing Sing and Attica and Bedford Hills. And so I'd like to know if you would be interested, if you are part of or would like to be part of the Transformative In-Prison Workshop Network.
Sure. Absolutely. We'd love to hear more about that. Thank you. If you put the information in the chat room, that would be great. So I would like to ask you a question, if you may, Heidi.
Yes, please.
So as we speak tonight, can either of you talk about the parole board currently, how much it's changed? How Hochul is doing with that? Are we still in the same situation we were before? Still in the same situation?
I could just say that, very briefly, I know Carol has a lot to say about it. The parole release rate remains the same, roughly between 35 and 40%. If you are in charge of a company and 60% of the cars were recalled, that company will fail. So if you're only releasing 35 to 40% of the people that go before you, you can't blame the people that go before you, because men and women have acquired, like one of the gentlemen say, a master's degree. That's not uncommon in our prison system. Not because of the state offers it, because they only offer higher education to a small amount of people. But people take it upon themselves. They use their time, what resources they have, to not only get higher education, but to create the most effective programs to help us transform our thinking, completely change our thinking and our behavior patterns. The things that contributed to us being incarcerated, we collectively address that. The Department of Correction does not address it. So when we come out, you'll see men like me and women who are the most effective, credible messengers in our communities. And tell me, our communities need men and women like me who can relate to these kids, who can give them a vision of a future that's not involved gangs, drugs, and interpersonal violence. We become the most socially conscious persons in our community. We're the ones that's actually going door to door, telling people how valuable their vote is, and they listen. So we are a part of the solution today, but the parole board continues to function on this culture of punishment, just denying parole for the one thing no human being can change, the nature of the crime, and dismissing extraordinary accomplishments and achievements during decades of incarceration. This is why RAP focuses on changing this system, to transform this system to the point where it becomes a system that values the humanity and dignity of those in whose custody they're in the care of, and to challenge the parole commissioners those who cannot, though, if a parole commissioner does not value transformation, doesn't believe in transformation, he should not serve on the panel, any panel that's deciding whether the person should be released or not.
Thank you.
I want to follow up on that too, because I don't know about in New York, but I know in Massachusetts, they're appointed by the governor, parole board members. And half of them, I don't think have ever even been inside a prison or have even like talked to men and women behind the walls. So that's the piece that, like you said, Jose, I mean, there's no humanity. There's no humanity. I didn't see any humanity in that film from any members except for Carol.
Well, I just would like to say, I learned so much by being on the parole board. And of course, I think I'm doing much better off the parole board. But what Jose has underscored is the fact that we don't actually understand the purpose of parole. Purpose of parole is not to keep punishing people. The purpose of parole is to make sure we are people able and ready to go home. There's a very, very tiny sector that are unable to, and it's sad, and it's on us. Mental illness, you know, people that we can't figure out where they could live, all those things. The reality is that my colleagues are very risk averse, and you're right, it is political. I didn't have any politics in the game. I was an older person. I was a reformer. I came at this job to try and change parole. How silly of me, but I think Jose underscores the point. We have to really articulate what it is that parole is and also not have it tied so to politics. Most of the parole board members currently in New York, just so you know, have not been reappointed. They have been serving for 3 years without an appointment. Ridiculous, frankly. And who else, you know, if this was a business, it is very poorly run. Secondly, we need to understand that this is the purpose of parole is really to help people go home. And the other thing we haven't talked about tonight are these onerous conditions on people that the parole board set when they are released on parole. We haven't even talked about that, but if you follow the news at Rikers or anywhere else, you understand that people fail on parole, not because they can't do it, because these conditions are inappropriate for who they are. So I feel like we are in a maelstrom of trying to figure out this quagmire that we've created. And I do think the other thing we have not talked about, parole board commissioners set conditions of parole, but they also do victim impact statements. I have found this to be incongruous with the job, because if you interviewed a mother, and frankly, I wish we had better options for victims of heinous offenses. Their main power is to try and hold people in prison. They don't have any other recourse with their anger, frustration, whatever. And they're fanned by the Police Benevolent Association, by all this other media attention. The reality is they don't heal. You know, my mother, as I told you, was a drunk, you know, a victim of a drunk driver. Imagine if they kept coming up with, oh, Shirley, you shouldn't let this person out of jail or prison. No, that's so wrong. And so if you have heard a mother cry, oh, my poor son, and we're talking 30 years ago, I have had my colleagues say, I can't let this person out of prison. There's a recent victim impact statement. That is not the purpose of victim impact statements. Victim impact statements were designed to affect sentencing, not parole release decisions. And so we're in this mess. And why parole board commissioners are doing this, I really can't fathom, frankly.
Thank you, Carol. Nora? You have your hand raised.
I was just asking, how did it happen? One of the men in the film said that he was eligible for parole I think 1999, but he was not released until 2018. I don't understand, what does eligible mean?
It means that when a judge sentences you to a period of 15 years to life, that means that in that 15 year, you will appear before the parole board for release consideration. And
Oh,
as Carol
starting
said,
year 15?
right, starting the year 15. So what we do, a lot of us in prison, you know, while we're waiting to get to that minimum set by the court, we do everything we possibly can and beyond. But when we go before the parole board, that minimum set, they dismiss all that, devalue everything we've done for decades, and deny parole. And in one of the men's case, deny parole double the time that the court sentenced him as a minimum. And they act as a resentencing body, which they're there to just evaluate whether the person today should be released back to his family and community. Not whether he deserves to be punishment. And I like to add, recall what Commissioner Ferguson said, you know, that who makes that determination where a person's been punished enough? What system, you know, makes that determination? How do you say, okay, you've been punished enough? That's the problem. That's the fundamental problem with having commissioners who rely on punishment to make a determination and devalue everything else a person has done.
And I want to add to that, and I think Jose underscores it. The reality is there are formal letters that are considered by a parole board from the district attorney, judges, and victims. And the best ones I read were the judge saying, I sentenced this person to 15 to life with the expectation that the parole board would release when they are able to go home. And, you know, the idea really should have been the minimum, right? It should be more than that, particularly when people have achieved so much, as Jose said. Jose and his colleagues in prison, I can't tell you, I met so many more learned people than myself who have transformed their lives, oh my God, 5, 10, 15 years before I met them. But for some reason, we're not valuing the idea of a minimum sentence at all. And it goes to this point of Ferguson and others feeling that we should be hurting people and punishing them and their families and the communities of which they're attached to, as Jose eloquently talked about, to no end. And we're hurting our democracy by doing that. We have people that are not voting. We have people that are disenfranchised, and people that are really hurting when there's this group of people that I can tell you, when they come out of prison, Jose and his colleagues and many others are the most exemplary, amazing people in communities, particularly of color, who are looking for leaders, mentors, and people who can help the youth and others out of their situations. And we're not utilizing them. It's really tragic, frankly. And we don't see this in the rest of the world. We see this uniquely in America.
Can I just ask for clarification? Jose said that somebody went before the parole board and his sentence was extended. Did I understand?
What happened when a person is sentenced to 25 years to life, that person appears before the parole board at that 25th year. The purpose of the parole originally was, before Pataki came in and other punishment addicts, people who are addicted to punishing other human beings, parole was to really evaluate what has the person done since they've been incarcerated. That leads me to believe that he or she will return back to society and live a law-abiding life.
Mm-hmm.
That's now, a person serving a life sentence could be denied parole over and over and over until he dies. And I know quite a few, too many men they have done that too. They deny parole until the person died. So I know my first mentor died at his 14th parole hearing. He had asked to be excused to go to the bathroom, and he had a massive stroke in the bathroom, never completed the hearing, and died. So this happens. People commit suicide after their 10th to 12th parole denial because you take something away from a human being and then there's nothing left. This is the problem. And then investigative reports have exposed the racial bias in the parole process. Black and Hispanic men and women are denied parole 3 times more than their white counterparts. This is something that's established. You can't refute it, but you don't want to fix it. We have to fix this thing. And we at RAP, we promote legislation that will fix this tragedy.
And I just want to say, it's not about the racial composition of the board, because I was a part of people being Black and brown Puerto Rican joining the board. They are as risk averse, by the way, as anybody who is white. So it is not necessarily by race. We don't have a litmus test for our values that are really significant in thinking about the role of being a parole board commissioner. We should be asking questions about, do you believe in forgiveness? Do you believe in redemption? Do you believe that people can transform themselves? We're not asking those questions, and it's quite sad.
Thank you.
Heidi, I'd like to pose a question from the chat.
Oh, please.
From Carolyn. How do you think the experiences of people who are given life sentences differ from those who are sitting on death row? Similarities. Carolyn also says, by the way, amazing film. I want to become a criminal defense lawyer, and work like this continues to inspire me. Ooh, thank you, Carolyn. So back to repeat the question, how do you think the experiences of people who are given life sentences differ from those who are sitting on death row?
I say, RAP just collaborated with a group of legal service providers and other criminal justice organizations to prepare a report on death by incarceration, and that this constitutes torture. And we presented the report to the special rapporteur at the UN. And the UN is scheduled to issue a statement in the very near future based on the report that we submitted. We're saying that when you deprive a human being of hope, that constitutes torture, that death by incarceration sentences, even though 25 years to life is a parole eligible sentence, but it becomes a death by incarceration sentence because the parole board at the back end perpetually denies parole. And when people start dying as a result of that, that is a death by incarceration sentence. In fact, just about every life sentence could be transformed into a death by incarceration sentence. So we're saying that the UN should condemn these sentences in the United States as a violation of people's human rights and as torture.
Jose, thank you for that comment. And I just want to add a brief comment. I was so struck by what you said. I did not know the number of men that died of heart attacks. And it has very personal meaning to me because I'm also a writing mentor for Transforming Lives. And just months before his 70th birthday, my writing partner died of a heart attack. So now I know that that's not, that wasn't an isolated incident. Thank you so much.
Let's go to the next person. Unless Salome, is there another question in the chat?
There are a couple more questions in the chat, but let's alternate and go to the next person whose hand is raised.
Okay. Pranav.
Yes, I have a question about the whole this whole thing about parole. It's pretty interesting hearing different people's experiences. But one question I have is in terms of so parole with George Pataki's reforms, how much harder would it be for somebody who got, say, who's serving a long sentence, not a life sentence, but for something a little bit lighter than murder? Would they have a much harder time to getting parole, or would they have almost as hard a time in the system we have?
In New York, we have what is called determinate sentence. For the most part, those serving a set flat sentence, they don't appear before the parole board. The ones that appear before the parole board, where you have an indeterminate sentence, which has a minimum number and then a maximum number. It could be 50 years to 100. That's an indeterminate sentence, and that this person will appear before the parole board and be subjected to the same paradigm of punishment.
Thank you, Jose. So we will take the next question in the chat from Margaret. What happens to those who are finally released? After spending so much time away from outside society, how can we assist them to become reintegrated? Do they receive any kind of therapy or assistance when they leave? And if so, could that possibly be part of the problem? That the system doesn't want to spend that money on people to be released and treated outside. Thank you for this eye-opening film. Okay, there was a multi-part question from Margaret, so I can repeat any part if necessary.
Well, I would like to take a stab at that. I ran a nonprofit that focused on people coming back from prison. And what I will tell you is it's easy to think that people coming home from prison need to be fixed. They don't. So how do we, instead of looking at deficits, look at assets? And Jose, I'm sure would back me up on this. What are they bringing back to the community? Not just what do they need? Secondly, most people coming home from prison are going back to family, friends, clergy, some other network. And the reality is we need to support them just as much as people coming home from prison. And the idea that people need to be fixed, people need services, we need to start asking people who are experts in their own lives, what would help them, not make assumptions. And so this idea that we need and this is where parole conditions came in originally 20, 30, 40 years ago, was the idea that people coming home from prison need all these things. But we've attached these conditions that may or may not be appropriate for the people coming home. So unless we have a process that values strengths in people instead of deficits, instead of what needs to be fixed, what's wrong, is what are you proudest of? What do you bring? How can we help you, instead of imposing a lot of things that may or may not be appropriate? A lot of people coming home from prison have a lot of resources. Some don't. We have a plethora. Believe me, I understand this from my work across this country, is that people come home with different needs and different strengths. The question is, how do we access them without demonizing them and punishing them for failure? And, you know, we have a huge addiction issue. We have a huge mental health issue. How do we address those things, not just from an individual perspective, but from with the network in which people are connected, and do it so respectfully instead of demonizing? That's my 2 cents.
And I'll add to that, the Columbia University School of Social Work prepared a report where they estimated that if New York was to pass the elder parole bill and the Fantini parole bill, these are the two bills that we advocate as means of transforming the system, that if New York was to pass these bills, it would save the state $500 million a year in the 10-year period. $500 million a year. Money that could be used for not just reentry services for former incarcerated people, but could be used in our communities, you know, the neglected communities in our state. But instead, they choose to use that money to punish. And I want to answer a question that was posed to me directly on the chat for just a couple of minutes. The question was, I think, related with stress, how people deal with stress. In my experience, no, I'm not a doctor or anything of that nature, but I think not just the medical conditions are horrible, the oppressive conditions, you know, they just wear a person down. But there's one thing, in my opinion, that does the most damage, or combined with all these other conditions, really damages the person. Loss of family ties. That is so critical when you're in a cell for those many hours a day, just thinking about a mother worried about her children who were 4 or 5 years old when she was separated from them. Just think of what she would go through, or father going through every time they hear of some stray bullet hitting a kid, thinking that that could very well be his child. And I think that contributes. This is why it's so critical to have that dignity to release people at an age where they can return back to their family, be not only responsible family members, but responsible in the community, and be productive in the community, as opposed to releasing them when they're 75 years old. Their body is more like a 90-year-old man's body, and then they become a burden to our community, not to family, but to the community and to society at large.
Thank you both. I'm going to try Gemma again. She switched to a new computer. So Gemma?
Parole is actually, it's quite disgusting, and I'm going to tell you why. Because, you know, they don't do the rehab programs like they're supposed to do in prison. And I'm speaking from a very good friend of mine who is a parole officer by day and a mental health therapist at Rikers at night. And I always say to him when he's going around, I say, well, what about the programs? He's like, there are no programs. And I say, what do you mean? He's like, they try, you know, programs for them, and let's get, you know, put them into groups. He said, no. He said they do pseudo groups so that they can step away for a little while. He said there's no rehabilitation in prison whatsoever. He said, and when you go up for the parole, he said, and let's just say then you get it. He said, so you come out and what? He said, you can't get a job because no one's going to hire you. So that ruins your morale right there and then. He said, you have plans. He said, but no one wants to hire a quote unquote criminal, saying that because whether you did it or you didn't, you're still locked up, and that's all that they see. He said, so where's the support? He said, you know, it's really sad. He said, and I go around and he said, when I have my parolees, he said, I go around and I try to inspire them because they're so down in the dumps that now they are free, but they're not free. He said, and the littlest infraction will put them right back in prison, right back in Rikers. He said, so now they're back to day one. He said, so it's an ongoing system. He said, and parole is honestly set up to literally lock you up again. He said, that's it. He said, there's no way that you can come out after being in prison for 25 years, 10 years, 50, whatever it may be. He said, when your childhood is taken away from you. And, you know, he says, as men, you know, when you are 20, you're still a child. He said, so now you're coming out, you've learned nothing at all, and you have nowhere to go. And half the time, he said, part of your family abandoned you anyway. He said, so it's the difficulty of being able to come back and come into society and be accepted. He says it's slim to none. He said, so everything is set up for you to literally go back to prison because they have to fill their beds or else they lose funding. He said it's a big process. And I do lots of research on this as well. And honestly, and the Black and brown individuals who are in prison, that's who they want in prison. And they don't want white folk in prison. And, you know, okay, they did this, but when like someone that go for parole, yeah. So the percentage of them getting released much higher, without a doubt. He said, you know, it's a sad thing. He said it's all, and prison is a moneymaker. I mean, I know we all know about Angola. I mean, who doesn't? And Angola produces fish and they have farms. It's a 35-acre prison. And the people work for 3 cents an hour from sun up to sundown. And they produce a massive amount of vegetables and food. They have a whole fish thing that, you know, that I don't want to tell you the fish, but specifically a whole huge aquarium. It's a money-making business. That's all prison is. And I'm not saying some individuals don't deserve to be in prison, the heinous crimes that, you know, I don't even want to hear about. But in all honesty, it's like, that's all it's about. And when they don't fill their beds, they don't receive the funding, and then they lose money. So as long as they can fill their beds and do what they have to do, they're going to keep setting these stringent rules where people will never survive on the outside. And that's what it's honestly disgusting. It should not be like that. Trust me. And it's politics, obviously. And we know who's going to, you know, I'm in an organization and we were with the bail reform. I was with the RAP people in Albany at the end of, you know, at the last year's budget convention. I met some great individuals and we all knew that bail reform wasn't gonna get passed. Why? You want to know? Because if Hopewell lost her people in Long Island, her voters, then she would have lost. And now she's going up again. So if she said, okay, yes, let's do bail reform, she would be in the dirt right now going for re-election. And I'm not a Republican, but that was the game. If I say yes to bail reform, I'm gonna lose my Long Island voters. I can't do that. So this is all a game. It's all politics. It's all everything. So this is gonna keep going till someone or something, I should say, finally puts their foot down and does something to change it. But you know, and whether the parole board has people of color or white people on it, that doesn't make a difference. The whole part is that, you know, it's parole is designed to keep people inside and not outside. And that's my say, but.
Thank you, Gemma. Thank you
Well,
very much.
I just want to say to Gemma, you're totally right. We have created an industry around our carceral world. I couldn't agree more. And what's fascinating to me, there's a lot of benign industries attached. It's not all the punitive industries. It's architecture, it's lighting, it's food services, it's healthcare. It's things that most of us in the public, you know, not in prison, take for granted. But private businesses are thriving on this carceral world. So I totally agree. But what you're suggesting, and I agree with this too, is we need a different discourse on this. It isn't just about parole reform. You know, it's a much larger issue that is affecting why we are incarcerating so many people at so many different state, local levels, right? It's a business we've created in this country, much like our military. And unless we find new jobs, new ways of employing people, look at the strength of the unions in our jails and prisons around this country, we are going to keep being Sisyphus, right? We're just going to keep throwing the ball up. So I agree. The question is to go to Jose and others who are on the street level. There are still things we can be doing in spite of this massive industry we've created. And part of it is through legislation, part of it is through our practices and through our legislative reforms that we can try and maneuver. But I think, Gemma, you are totally right. It's a huge business. And we've built this, you know, you've all read the books. I mean, we've built this since slavery. I mean, it has just been part of our culture to do this. And to dismantle it is really quite a challenge for those of us, I think everyone here tonight is aware of.
Oh
Thank
my.
you, Carol.
I just wanted to jump in and acknowledge my co-moderator that we got 6 minutes and lots of hands and some questions in the chat as well. So obviously we won't be able to get to everyone, but Heidi, we have time for maybe one more, if it's not a very long.
People should try and really be short, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Leah, you're up.
Okay, so quickly. Okay, so I am so moved by this movie, and I'm still reeling from the New York Times article last Sunday about the suicides and juvenile detention in a place in Louisiana. And I'm an attorney, and I'm also a seminary student. And I guess my question is, I don't know anything about criminal law. I've been a civil attorney all my career, but how can we help? What can we do? Give us some suggestions of what we can do.
Well, Heidi, I think that's to say
three things.
Go ahead.
I think that we really have some opportunities here with the work that we're doing in transforming lives, which is now including creating videos for people who are going towards clemency, going towards a parole board. You can get involved with us. I know Jose has lots of things going on, right, Jose? So I think that certainly look into our two organizations.
Okay.
I'll quickly say that I think that just having this discourse, talking about the issues, explore different ways of dealing with interpersonal violence. Perpetual punishment does not keep us safe. That's undisputed. So if it doesn't keep us safe, why keep relying on it? We have to explore different avenues. And I say that those different avenues involve some type of form of restorative justice or transformative justice.
And Carol, our intention was that each of you would have an additional word to focus on what can we do. So would you like to add your voice to what we can do as your closing comment?
Muted.
Carol,
I feel like I spoke enough. Thank you very much.
Okay, wonderful. So with the 3 minutes left, what we are going to do now is Heidi, take it away.
Okay, well, what an evening. What an evening. I am going to place the resource list in the chat before we close. So please feel free to download that. And it has so many things on it. If you want to watch another documentary, if it's got books, it's got organizations, it's got places to donate, however you feel fit to participate, check out the resource list. And it's not just for New York either. It's hopefully it's all of US and other areas. So I will be putting that in the chat. Cynthia just put in Transforming Lives. We also have a lovely response from Jose. He put in the RAP link too. So please feel free to use both of those to reach back out. And I will turn it back to Salome so I can find the resource list.
Okay, so this has been such a credible discussion. We are so sorry for all of those of you who put questions in the chat and who put your hands up that we could not get to, but you can follow up with the resource list. Certainly you can follow up with Jose with the link to RAP, and you can follow up with us with One Spirit in Action, which is also in the chat, and we will do our best to connect you to help get your question answered. It's 8:30. Thank you so much for making this program so valuable by coming with your questions and your intentions to participate in change. This is not the end. This is a continuation of a movement, and we hope that you will join us. Thank you so much. Thank you to our speakers, Cynthia Kling, Jose Saldana, and Carol Shapiro for speaking, but also for your good work. Thank you for all who came, and we wish you good night.